to refresh real quick, how we were talking about how we have, different traits, but, kind of to make it seem a little bit more interesting, we were calling them like superpowers, right? So, and, now I'm not talking about strength and flying and stuff like that. I got to clear it out because I know not just because of here, but because also on the live is that there might be someone out there who might be thinking about that other stuff. And with experience and things like that, you really have to clarify some things because there's just some people out there whose brain doesn't work properly. So you gotta make sure you emphasize on things. So like I said, like superpowers, and what we had listed was the social skills, and just to like recap real quick, social skills having a superpower is in the sense of like that you're able to, and this goes without saying of, as a Christian, spiritually working to building better, that goes without saying. But like, again, I have to make sure I emphasize that because there's people out there. And like social skills, having good social skills of being able to, at work, at school, and being able to communicate, be able to not be someone that because people see, like I said, refresh. People notice you if you talk, if you conversate, and if you don't. And if they see that you're just isolated and you don't really like engage in anything, they're going to be like, well, that's supposed to be like a Christian, and he's just kind of a loser because he's just there isolated, doesn't really talk or nothing. Like, and because people talk, people say, I've heard it. So, building up that social skill so you can able to emphasize, give your opinion, have a stronger foundation, not just like in work and school, but also in your faith. That's with like social skills. The other one, patience, being able to be patient. Like goes back to the thing, we've noticed how sometimes people are not patient. And, people will say in school, at work, and other places, oh, he's a Christian and he doesn't even have patience. And that's something that we should have is patience. And, like anything else, there's a limit to certain things, but that goes mostly through experiences and different levels of our school and work and stuff like that. And then loyalty, having loyalty to, like, for example, here goes without saying, loyalty to Christianity, to our faith, but loyalty also in, with people, with fellowship, friends, brothers and sisters, in work, you being loyal to like what are your obligations in that workplace, and not being a dishonest person or someone that cheats and is not a loyal person. And, just to refresh real quick, and confidence, having confidence of being able to speak, being able to, put yourself forward. Sometimes I think, and it goes at different levels, different people, because everyone's different, everyone thinks differently, acts differently, and is around different environments. So there's many ways of emphasizing the confidence. How we were kind of saying is one of the most feared things in people is public speaking. Now there's a lot of people have a really high fear of not talking to people in a crowd. And I think we can, for the ones that came in on the event of the youth, we have of the kids, we have an idea, and, I don't want to mention it, but, who he knows how it is coming up here and being in front of people, how, even though it's people that people that you're familiar with, but it's scary, like, because you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, and, that's going to be one of his long life experiences that he's going to be like, yeah, it's not as easy going in front and talking to people, even though it's people that you already know. So, got a little bit taste of that. But having that confidence, it's something that you build up with time. And, some people are just born with it. They're just confident to talk with people and around people, but there's some people that are not. So that's something that you should learn with experience. And then, it goes honest, being honest, that's also, a big thing, kind of goes in with loyalty, but it's a little bit different, being honest with yourself first, and also being honest in work, in school, and with your with your parents, with your siblings, being honest. I think that's one of the most early superpower that you can kind of have is as you're growing up is being honest. And the only other person of authority that we have when we're growing up as kids is your parents, being honest with your parents on what you're doing or what you're going to do. And, they can start off with simple as schoolwork, homework. Are you doing good in school? And you can say no, but you're not being honest. You should be saying, you should be honest. And if you're not doing good, you should let them know. Because at the end of the day, I think which is a good thing and a bad thing, it depends on how you take it. But the good thing about being honest with your parents when it comes to like schoolwork and things is because, by them knowing, some parents will help you. They'll be like, oh, what do you need help in? What do you need work with? Let's work on this together. And unfortunately, I mean, some of the people that we know that I know here, and me for that little experience that I had at working at the school, there's some parents that unfortunately don't really care too much. And like you, let's say if you're honest with them and tell them that you need help, instead of helping you, they'll just bring you down and be like, oh, you see, I've heard this expression a lot with Spanish speaking. And it's like, oh, pues para eso vas a la escuela, para eso sabes inglés if you can't even, learn the basic schoolwork. So instead of helping, they bring you down. But that's more like on the parent side. That's, a different level. But honesty, to be able to break down honesty real quick. Empathy, feeling empathetic to people. I mean, you guys know these vocabulary words, right? We kind of went over them. You guys understand them for the most part, right? Yes. All right, cool. Empathy, and it's not, a lot of people take it for like, oh, you're feeling sorry for people. And it's like, no, you shouldn't really be feeling sorry for people. It's more like helping. Like, for example, sometimes let's say you own a business and one of your employees is running late because their kid missed the bus, so they had to take them and they're running late. And, it's a good, honest reason. And, showing empathy is giving them like, okay, I understand that happened. So, if you're 10 minutes late, 15 minutes late, I understand. That's some sort of way of showing empathy. If you guys, there's different ways of showing it, but that's just a quick example that you guys can visually see and understand. And then, like I said, courage, going back to a little bit about public speaking, having the courage to, because even, I'm pretty sure it's easy to say, oh, I don't want to go in front of people and talk, I'm pretty sure if you guys have worked in group projects and things like that, and it's always like, oh, who's going to talk in front of the class, You guys are trying to figure out who's going to be talking in front of the classroom, and like some people are more shy than others. So, that's a little source of courage that like, well, I'll do it, I'll do it even though I don't want to do it. You can, put it in sports and many other things. But one of the main things is being able to have courage to like speak out for yourself and, show that, you're brave. And then self-discipline, that's another, superpower that you can have is having self-discipline. And I always bring it up, and I'm pretty sure you guys are gonna know, but going to the gym, that's self-discipline. Being consistent, going when you don't feel like going, you still gotta go. When you feel tired and stuff like that, that's a visualization that you guys could see is something like that. But there's many ways of showing self-discipline when it comes to like studying, or when it comes to like maybe doing homework. And there's a lot of ways that you can implement self-discipline, but that's like one of the most way that you can visually see it. So now with kind of, going over those, I had kind of given you guys a little assignment of what you can think of what's another superpower that you guys think that we could implement so you guys can do better, not just like spiritually in God, but also in the world out there, because it's easy to just be like, oh, we're here in church and we're going to put all these, these traits to ourselves, but we are also out there living in the real world, and there's a lot of stuff that happens out there that, like a lot of experiences that we do not get to experience being here at church, listening on Sunday, but those are experiences that you listen out there or that you experience out in the real world, which could be, like I said, work or school. So did you guys think of any? The ones that were here, obviously the ones that are not here, this is new, but the ones that were here the last couple of weeks, did you guys think of any, at least maybe one? I'm going with hopefully. I was thinking in my head, like, hopefully at least we get 3. At least 3. But, I mean, did anybody think of one? And I hope you guys understood, too, like, what I meant, because I know there was some other stuff that, for example, someone had mentioned, peace. But peace is not really much of a trait. It's something that with these, they're gone. With these with these things that you can help produce peace, having empathy, you can produce peace to another person. For example, the employee running late, and then in their head they're worried, their anxiety, all these things come into their head. But by you being as a boss empathetic, you're going to bring peace to them, knowing that they could come to work and not worry. That's hopefully you guys get it. But did you guys think of any? At least 3, please God. All right, go for it. Okay, yeah, we can do passion. Yeah, that's a good one. So if you can, yeah, type it under. So how could we? So what was your interpretation of passion, real quick? Like, what do you see? You said passion, so what do you see? What's passion, and to your understanding? You gotta say. You see, you know how we were talking right now about encouraging, about fear, about talking in front of people. This is the moments. These are moments like that. Like, go for it, man. Show some of that courage. Show some of that confidence. But like, what's your idea? Yeah, I mean, now you don't have to remember exactly what it said, but what's an idea? When someone tells you passion, what do you think of? Not the Passion of the Christ, the movie, but like, what's something that you can think of? Okay, so okay, yeah, so that's something that yeah, we'll break down the sequence a little bit more, but like he said, something that you want to do, right? And usually when you hear the phrase, oh, I'm passionate for this. Let's say like something with okay, let's quick little. Just I'm going to use you as an example. What's something you want to do maybe when you grow up? Okay, let's say he wants to become a boxer. So you need passion in order to what? To be self-disciplined. You need to have confidence to get into the ring. You need to have courage to jump even like into the ring, thinking that you're gonna win or not. So you to proceed all these as a boxer, as he said, he needs to have that passion, and that passion is something that you're gonna need to implement. Like a lot of these other traits, these other powers, you're gonna have to be able to become a boxer. You're gonna need to be courageous. You're gonna need to be confident. You're gonna need to have good social skills, to get promoted, to put yourself out there. So all these other traits, they all go hand in hand one way or another. And like he said, if he wants to become a boxer and having the passion for it, you implement all these other traits and you're able to become a boxer. Self-discipline. That's like anything that would be one of the biggest ones, one of the biggest powers that you can have to become a boxer and follow your passion, because you're gonna need a lot of self-discipline. So that's a perfect one. So what's another one? Anybody, not just you, but anybody. Nasa, go for it. Organization. Yeah, that's a good one. And like I said, we're talking about traits or superpowers that can help us implement each one of these. But the mainly course is to be able to, like my dad was talking about earlier about the fruits of the spirit, is to be able to skyrocket those things even more. Using all these things not just for your daily life, but to also push forward the fruits of the spirit. So organization. Also, what's for you? What's I mean, it's kind of self-defined, but what would be something that you can define with organization?
I mean, having things that, being able to have either,
You're saying a lot of nothing.
so being organized would help an individual be able to have things in the back of their mind that they'll be able to balance between, like, I'll give an example.
Yeah,
If
give an
someone
example.
wants to be, like going off of being a passion of wanting to talk or speak, they have the capacity to be organized in what they're going to say, having
Okay, yeah.
information that they're able to talk about, and having them like be ready.
Yeah, exactly like what I have to do. Exactly. See, perfect. Being organized and like me, being able to make sure I have the right words, the right verses and stuff like organized to be able to, talk to you guys. And that's just like an example that we're showing right now. Let's say if you're trying to do something with work, and you have an assignment, but you're trying to do it, but you're not organized. So, it's a mess. So you're not able to finish your assignment because you're not an organized person. And that could go in with just like simple, like even with, I mean, especially with school, doing projects and things like that, being organized, making sure everything's ready at your disposal. And it could go in, like I said, with a lot of things, even at work. A lot of the people would think about it more like office jobs. That's a big way to show that you got to be organized. But not just like that. Even if you do like trade work, like with tools and things like that, you gotta also be organized because if you have your tools all over the place, and you need to do something, oh, where's the tool? So half the time you start looking for the tool, cuts down on your time to do the job. And then next, you can't find the tool to do the job. And then your boss comes around and says, hey, why haven't you finished the job? It's like, oh, well, I can't find my tools. And then it's like, well, why don't you have your tools organized? It just snowballs into like bigger issues and things like that. So yeah, organization is one of the biggest things that we could implement with each other. So let's think of another one. Go for it. Oh yeah, good one. That's one that I had on the list. Yeah, respect. Yeah, perfect. Because I have a list of like different ones, so that's one of them. And respect is a very treacherous word in the way of how people use it nowadays. Well, even before, but one of the ways that is treacherous is in the way of like gang members. Oh, you gotta respect me, and it's like, well, a lot of you're disrespecting my block and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's not even your block; it's the city's. If the city wants to build a mall in there, your block is gone, like you literally have no power over that. But, people that, like I said, oh, he disrespected me and stuff like that. Because I'm thinking about a lot of like stories and stuff that people are just kind of like, dude, like, so, okay, I'll give you an example of someone that thinks they know what respect is, right? So this person was, it's at work, me and my work stories. So this individual was trying to, he had to escort people out that either got fired or suspended. And I don't think anyone yet, but I mean, has anyone here ever gotten fired or suspended? I don't think so, right? I hope not, And if we, I hope no one here has gotten fired or suspended. But if, let's say you got in trouble, usually, for the most part, even though it's your fault or not, you feel pretty angry when you get in trouble, Either angry at the person that got you in trouble or angry at yourself, but you get angry to a certain extent. So usually when they're escorting you out from the classroom or in this case work, you tend to, have attitude, show some sort of arrogance, like, oh, I don't even need this job. And, I've seen it a few things. Well, this person was supposed to escort this person that got let go. And the person was leaving, and the guy was trying to tell them, like, oh, you should look into this job, look into that job, don't worry about it. But this person was pretty mad, so he wasn't really paying attention. And he's like, hey, I'm talking to you. And the guy's like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to leave, And the guy got escorted out, and the dude that was doing the escorting was telling me, like, oh, that guy disrespected me. Like, well, how? He's like, well, because I was trying to help him and tell him what to do and this and that, and you just ignored me, so I felt disrespected. And I was all like, hey, man, relax. Like, dude, he got let go. Like, he doesn't want to hear you, man. Like, he just wants to leave the site. He doesn't want to. They're mad. They're angry. They don't want to hear what you're going to say. Unless you get their job back, but other than that, they don't really want to hear what anybody wants to say. And he was like, no, that's disrespect. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do? Complain? He's already gone. Oh, well. And then, he was just kind of throwing a fit. But the point is that in his mind, he thought he got really, in his end, he thought that he got really disrespected. He was making a big scene. When people would leave, he would, like, tell everybody. And I was like, damn, dude, like, that's really going a little far of you feeling, disrespected. Do you really know what the term means, how to be respected? And he's like, well, that's disrespect. I was like, well, it's not really. But, but going back to what I'm trying to say is that a lot of, like, that word gets used around a lot in ways that it really isn't, like, this individual was not disrespecting you. He just wanted to go along his day, but you took it as disrespect. And, there's a famous saying is that, I don't give respect if they don't give it back, and things like that. There's, like I said, respect is a word that gets thrown around a lot and with no real weight to it, as they say. One of the things that we can even say, actually, I've kind of seen it here, and like I had mentioned it before, how sometimes I'm also very observant, is like a lot of maybe kids and teens and things like that around that age. How sometimes when, maybe an older brother is saying hello to you and stuff, show respect and say hello back, shake their hand, or if they hand something that I think is bad mannerism, especially with kids and teens and stuff, is when like an adult hands you something, and instead of you like taking it, you in Spanish is se lo arrebatas. It's rude. You kind of just like what do you call it? Well, I was gonna say manhandle because it's like, but that's not really the right word. But you show no respect in what someone's giving you. And I've seen a lot of kids do that. They give you something and you just take it, or I've seen a lot of like, oh well, yeah, just take it, and it's rude. It's rude, especially when and that's a sign of disrespect to, and especially here in the church. That's what I'm trying to get at. Is that it's a sign of disrespect, showing that someone's offering you something, someone's giving you something, or someone's just simply saying hi to you, and you show no remorse of mannerism. I think that's a big thing, no mannerisms, and that's a big sign of disrespect. Having no respect, and like I said, growing up in your household, with your parents, that's like one of the biggest ways that you build up your sense of respect and understanding the term is showing respect to your parents. Sometimes you may not like it what they tell you, and with me as I get older, there's some times where I feel like there's things that like, yeah, maybe that's not really right, but it's your parent. You got to show respect regardless. Now, if you want to understand more the reason why your parent maybe said no or got you in trouble or whatever reason, maybe at that moment you'll get mad and like I always say, go to your room, lock the door, and pack your backpack and think that you're gonna, leave your house that night, listen to loud music. But at the end of the day, what the best thing that you guys could do growing up, the ones that are still teens and stuff and growing up, is that understand your parents. Ask them like, why did you say no? And sometimes the parents are, like I said, it goes hand in hand with how each family is. But some parent doesn't even want to bother explaining to you, and that's very unfortunate. But then there's the parents that especially here in church and Christianity, that should find the time to explain to you why they said no and stuff like that. And you, as their child, should take in consideration that you need to obey. You need to show them the respect they deserve because they're your parent. That's, like I said, respect is it's a word that, it builds up in the household first. Because then as you start getting older, you start, especially teens start disrespecting their parents. And then I think I mentioned this a little bit in the beginning of the year, how sometimes, as teens and kids, you start showing a lot of resentment, a lot of disrespect to your parents. And then you start getting that affirmation from like kids from school and things like that, and you think that, oh yeah, they're the ones that respect me and things like that. It's a very, like I said, treacherous word, because a lot of them, for like gangs and things like that, they use that word, they play with that word a lot. Oh, you disrespected me and things like that. When what is there to respect about a gang? There's nothing. If anything, all they do is evil things. You usually end up locked up, unfortunately, die sometimes with that. So where's all that respect at? And then that's just like as if you're teens and things like that. But like as you get older, like me, also not having respect to your bosses, or not even showing that you carry respect with you, people are not gonna respect you. And when, like, let's say you're trying to talk about a serious topic or something, and they see how you are, they're not really gonna take you serious because there's no respect for you. So you might think maybe as growing up as a kid, like, it doesn't really matter, respect, whatever. But as you get older, that follows you. If you behave bad, if you have attitude, if you talk back, if you have like disgruntlements and things like that, as you get older, no one's going to really take you serious, because they're going to be like, this guy, he doesn't deserve my respect because look how he acts. And then, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with, and that was, like I said, respect was one of the words that I picked as one of those like superpowers that is a little bit harder to. It's not that it's hard to obtain or to have or to give, but it's just you need to put in more work. You need to put in more work to do it, and you also got to get the right information, the right experience to be able to obtain that. It's a big superpower to have. But once you get older, when in life, as you grow up, as you become a parent, you're gonna see for yourself how it is for your kids to disrespect you and not have respect for you, and then you're gonna think like, why are they doing it to me? And it's like, as you as a kid, were you respectful? Were you a respectful person to your parent? But and then in the future, if you have kids, God willing, you see that the kids are disrespectful to you, they're, ignoring you, showing attitude and things like that. At the end of the day, you're going to be like, well, why did this happen? And the cycle kind of repeats itself. Even though, like right now, at these moments, we're, as people here, as leaders, we're trying to show you what to do, what kind of not to do, kind of give you examples of not to fall into those, things for the future. But you put respect, right? All right, cool. I think we can do a, let me see. Yeah, I think we have time for another one. Oh, the other twin. No, because he already picked one, so you. Okay, good one. Yeah, responsible. Go for it. So for you, what's responsibility? Okay. What's yeah, that's an act of responsibility. But overall, what's your like formal like meaning definition? That's an example, and that's a good example. Like that's an example of showing responsibility. But like, what is responsibility? No, it's okay if you don't know. Just I mean, it's just so you can understand the term. Like that. When you use terms and vocabulary, you can learn and stuff like that. And he's yeah, hey, at least he's saying something. Give him some credit. You know, but responsibility, like he said, he used the example of helping his siblings. And that is a big responsibility. Because you're helping your siblings to stay alive at that point. You're feeding them. You're making sure they don't get hurt and things like that. So that's a pretty big responsibility. It's a responsibility that is usually given to what? To parents. I'm not a parent, but like to parents. That they understand. They really understand the responsibility of working with their kids and showing them things like that. But a way that we can emphasize responsibility other than taking care of siblings and things like that is showing that you are held yourself accountable for things. That's a pretty good example. But let's take it turns with something maybe a little bit, maybe like in school, for example. So you have a project. And your responsibility as one in the project is to print out the assignment. That's your responsibility. And you kind of like lack on it, and you're like, you know what, I'll do it tomorrow morning. When you wake up late, depending if they take you to school or not, but because then, let's dive a little bit more into the lore, as they say, for responsibility. Okay, let's say you have an assignment that you need to print out for the group. Your responsibility was to print it. You're like, I'll print it tomorrow in the morning when I wake up. Let's say you wake up late. Your parents have to take you to school. Well, let's say your mom has to take you to school, and she's running late, because she's taking care of all the other siblings. Hey, we gotta go now before it gets more late, because then I'm gonna be late for work. And you're like, wait, hold on, I gotta print out the assignment. And she's like, no, we don't got time, because then I'm gonna be late, and then I'm gonna get in trouble. So we gotta go now. So, you go, you don't print the project, the paper, the assignment. You go to your classroom, you go with your group of friends or your in the project, and then they're like, hey, did you print out the assignment? Because, we got to present it today in front of the classroom. And then what are you going to say? Oh, I didn't do it. I forgot to do it. Or I was running late. And, you're going to be like, hey, man, that was your job, your responsibility to, put anything aside and do the assignment, print it out. Even though it's, something so simple, but even stuff like that, it's a responsibility, which means that you got to hold yourself accountable. Instead of maybe you sleeping early, or instead of you maybe, I don't know, eating ice cream or something, whatever you want to put. Instead of doing that, you should have, showed some responsibility, not done any of that, printed the assignment and have it ready. That's like a very small way of responsibility. But, as you get older, like let's say, as parents, which is a little bit more deeper, is, having the responsibility of your children. I like to look at a lot of articles of like different situations and things like that. And one of them that I was reading, I don't know why, and, it goes back to a lot of our fundamentals as Christians and how we are, but I mean, there's some times where you're like, wow, like there's some people that really have no morality. Well, this lady, she left her, I think it was like not even a year-old kid. She wanted to go out to a party, so she left her, I think it was a daughter. And if I remember correctly, I think she was like 10 months old. So she left her in the house, locked up all the doors, and said, I'm going to go party. And, hey, she goes partying. She comes back, and she had left her daughter in one of the, where they eat. And you know how those are like high rises when they're high and they're eating? And well, they have the high chairs. And well, with those hours, the baby started crying, and stuff like that, and shaking the thing. Well, to the point where the thing fell, and the baby hit her head and died. Well, when the mom shows up, the baby's dead in the room, and and she's like trying to make it seem like it wasn't her fault. No remorse, no sense of responsibility. Not just for her abandoning her child, but as of her for that mistake that she did. And of course, they put her on trial, and yeah, she got prison time. But that's like very extreme. That's like, but it goes to show you that even as parents and people that have to have the higher reverence of responsibility for someone else's life, they simply didn't care at that moment, Then after everything happens, they weep and moan, but, if you would have been responsible, none of that would have happened. But that's like for like high level, of irresponsibility, because you're in charge of someone else's life, especially, as parents. But, you can always go down to like certain things, like I said, homework assignments, jobs, tasks, especially when people are depending on you. One of the biggest roles that responsibility can fall, other than parents, is, if you're in the leadership position, because you're responsible for people. I think this was 2019, when I was working at one of the bases over there, and this one was in Texas, there was an accident with one of the soldiers. The Humvee, he was on the top, the turrets, and it was during the night iteration, so it's really hard to see during the night. The Humvee had hit a trench, and the Humvee flipped over and, crushed the soldier that was on top. And when that happened, we got an alert because it was during the iteration or the training exercise. So, I was right there in charge. So they're like, hey, get all your people back because we need to get a whole accountability for everybody, make sure everybody's okay, other than the individual that had the accident. So it was my responsibility to try to get a hold of everybody. And we have a map, and in each map, when like my people would go out around the base, we had grid coordinates, and the map had labeled each person's grid coordinates. So this person was with their, we call them battle buddies, which is two people. They were in this side of the map, this side of the map, this side of the map, and this side of the map. And it was my responsibility to go over the map, check all the grids, make sure who's around that area, make sure they're safe, make sure everybody gets called back, make sure they have proper comms, as they say, because we use radios, and sometimes the radios wouldn't be working. How can we get a hold of them to make sure everybody comes? So it's a sense of responsibility, and then all these other small details come in with that responsibility, and being able to determine, how am I going to be responsible for all these people, and if I got to also go through all these like filters of knowing where they're at, and can I communicate with them? Are they together, or did they separate? Did one go with the OPFOR? Did one go with the Blue 4? All these things, that come into your mind. And with some person that, maybe does not hold a higher level of responsibility, could be like, hey, well, whatever, hey, they're out there, too bad. Who cares? Abandon them. And there's people like that. There's people that I know that would be like that. Oh, well, it's their fault. If I can get a hold of them, well, too bad. And that's more of in the position that I was. And, since I'm a responsible person, I was able to get a hold of everybody and get everybody back and everything. But, at that moment, you're trying to figure everything out. And some people can, if they don't have that experience, you can say, of being, and that's just like one scenario. But if you don't have experiences with different forms of responsibility, something that's maybe a little bit bigger than the previous one can maybe, as they say, have you like break, And someone maybe that hasn't had as much experience in leadership, that was maybe in my position at that moment, did not have that experience. And at that moment, that person could have like just snapped and not cared about everybody because they're struggling with themselves. They weren't able to uphold their responsibility. You see what I mean? So like I said, there's responsibilities. it depends on your situation, depends on what position you're on. And there's sometimes good responsibilities, like for example, he's helping his siblings. That's a good responsibility to have because it's showing you, not just responsibility as in holding yourself accountable, but you're, responsible for also someone else's life, your sibling. And you don't really see it like that, or people might not see it like that, like, oh, it's just my brother, oh, it's just my sister. Hey, but you are, you're responsible with their survival at that moment because they're small, and then as you get older, you have a little bit higher responsibilities with your siblings, different forms of it, But, like I said, with time and time, it goes, it changes. So let's see, what time is it? Oh, yeah. I got one more. Does anybody else have any? All right. Highness? Oh, kindness. Did we have that one there already? It kind of goes with empathy. So we'll still break it down. We'll still explain it since he had the courage to ask, as they say. So kindness. Being kind to people. That's also a big thing because like let's use the example of responsibility. Like he was saying, he has to take care of his siblings. But if he's not being kind and doing it, oh, I gotta take care of them. Here's your food. You're not showing kindness, You can, and goes also with me. Let's say I had to get everybody back, and if I don't have any like kindness, you're showing responsibility by bringing everybody back or by taking care of your siblings. But if you're not kind in doing it, that's also not a good thing, And like I said, every situation is different, but kindness would be a good thing to have. Being patient, sometimes like going back to maybe what I had said the last couple of weeks with being patient, and I showed you how my story when I was trying to teach someone how to read the map, and they couldn't get it, and I was going crazy, but I had to still be kind and not blow off on them or single them out like crazy, like, oh, you're an idiot, like I had to be kind and patient. So yeah, kindness goes in hand with a lot of these other things. You can put it up there if you want, Charlene. It goes in hand with a lot of these things. And then just to kind of, maybe the ones that were not here last time, the reason why I was putting them as superpowers is because, maybe the terminology you guys can understand a little bit more. Also make it a little bit fun, like, hey, what's, maybe if you, since they're brothers, they can ask each other, oh, what's your, because I'm trying to think of other siblings that are here. Maybe like Benji and Ruth, like, that maybe get along, yeah, them. Not sunshine, your siblings. You guys know each other, and you guys kind of are siblings. You guys growing up together, you guys know how people are with each other. Like growing up in the household, like, hey, this guy is more responsible than this guy, but this guy is more patient than this guy. You guys are able to see each other's flaws, see each other's productivity levels. This guy is more scared of going in front of people. Oh, but this person is not as scared of going to people. So, like, especially with growing up with siblings, that's a good way to go back and forth with each other. And then you can even use that as a kind of like a live example. Like, my brother is not that patient. My brother is not really courageous. Oh, but I'm very self-disciplined. I have a lot of passion. And you can... Now that you've kind of seen this, like visually, you can even kind of see how maybe when you go back home after this, you guys can able to see each other's, superpowers, see who has this and who has that, and then work together, that would be the best thing is to help each other, to get better. And we can even start talking about like school and stuff like that. But, once you start growing up, you start dealing with more real life situations, one of the biggest thing that you can kind of start off early depending on a lot of things, but if you're getting into a relationship, that's also a big thing to have, having a lot of these characteristics, these powers to see are you going to be patient with her or him? Are you going to have empathy towards him or her? Like all these things, are you going to be responsible? Like all these things also come hand in hand. So it's not just something that we can just have and that's it. No, you implement it into your life, implement it into many situations like that, relationship, work, building up, maybe partnerships. There's a lot of things that you can use these things. And the main purpose goes back to, how we have the verse up there, Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperate. Against such things there is no law. And, like, these are things that, we put in here, to show and express, the fruits of the Spirit. That's what I was, when we started, I was trying to break down how these powers are not just for us here to be able to work with at school and work, but in church with the gospel, with Christianity, being able to use these things to implement, to skyrocket the fruits of the Spirit, let me go with another verse that I had in mind here. We go with Romans chapter 5, verse 3 and 5. So Romans chapter 5, verse 3 through 5. And not only so, but we glory in tribulations also, knowing that tribulations worketh patience, and patience experience, and experience hope. Well, that was 2, 3, and 4. But you know how it says here, in verse 3, and not knowing so, but we glory in tribulations, also knowing that tribulations worketh patience. So having different experiences, having different things going on in your life builds up each power, Tribulations, depending on what type of tribulations. If you're getting, the common word, my patience is being tested, How far is your patience going to go, If someone's testing it, some people might do it without them knowing, but some people will do it on purpose to see how far you will go. I mean, that's a form of, testing your patience and seeing how, are you going to explode, or are you going to, how are you going to deal with it? And like I said, it comes with different forms of levels depending on, your age and where you're at and stuff like that. But, like it says here, tribulations, obviously, the hardest tribulation you can maybe have, and like I said, it depends, because I got to say this, that it depends on what position you are, maybe what part of the world you live in, because I know there's someone out there who's going to be like, well, how are you comparing that to this? Like, I know, I understand, but I got to make sure everyone knows that I'm talking about like us here modern in America. But like tribulations, like growing up as a kid, maybe your biggest tribulation would, is going to be school. When you're in grade school, more like elementary, middle school, your biggest tribulation is maybe seeing where you're going to fit in, like who's going to still talk to me that talked to me in elementary. How am I going to behave maybe around teachers? That's kind of like, in a way, you can kind of say one of your tribulations, because that's something that you do outside of being at home. Because when you're home, you're under your parents' protection and they'll discipline you. But when you're not there, that's why I'm talking about tribulations, where you're more on your own. And then you get into high school. I mean, I don't know how it is now, but back then it's like, what group are you going to fall in? Are you going to fall in with the jocks? Are you going to fall in with the, rockers? Are you going to with, the basketball player? There was always categories when I was growing up. I don't know if it's still now, but, maybe for you that might be a tribulation trying to figure out what, where you're going to fit in and stuff. But at the end of the day, I think that and then some people, at the end of the day, I mean, that shouldn't matter. But there's some people that take all that stuff very personal, very like, oh, I don't fit in. There's always movies, there's shows, there's things where people are devastated because they don't fit in with the football players. No one accepts me, but it's like victim mentality, like that's just, you're just being yourself a victim. And us as, Christians, we shouldn't have that mentality. We shouldn't care what group we fit in, as long as, we are a good representation of Christianity. And how my dad was saying is that we shouldn't have any form of way of, causing the Jesus' name to be blasphemed, be cursed for our reason, for our fault. That should be our main focus, because, growing up and being around a lot of kids your age, it's easy to fall into all that. It's easy to fall into, peer pressure, as they say. And then sometimes, your parents might be telling you, like, oh, like, why are you doing that? Like, why? Like, Mom, you don't understand, Mom. Like, you've never been there, you're old. But that's, you're falling into, like, that victim mentality. You're going to be going through tribulations, as the word says, tribulations. And everyone's tribulation is different. And like also my dad said earlier, that there's some tribulations that it's kind of like, bro, really? You know, like there's some this I think this mostly goes with more on like the women's side, like, oh, what am I gonna wear? You know, there's some girls that go pretty you know, ballistic for not having the proper attire, you know, like, oh, this is my last night here, you know. There's girls that go crazy for that. And you know, it's like I said, you know, mediocre tribulations. That's not really a tribulation. You're just putting yourself in like the victim mentality card, you know, where oh, everybody hates me, I hate the world, you know, like, but you're just becoming a victim at that point. You know, you're just becoming a victim, and obviously you have none of these superpowers, because by having any of these, they go hand in hand, and you wouldn't become a victim, you know. Yeah, you having, especially here in, you know, and where we're at right now, it's really hard to actually be a victim of something. And I'm not saying there isn't. I'm pretty sure there's out there where families actually struggle, and things like that. And you know, that's a completely different situation, and that's something that, you know, you should have empathy. You know, you should have patience with them and things like that. But like having these powers, you know, they go all hand in hand. And I think one of the best things that we could do is not fall into the victim mentality, and using these. I think every time maybe you're thinking about yourself, maybe let's say you're feeling down about something, like let's see, there's a lot of situations, but one that could easily be is like, maybe I'm not good at sports, you know, and you always get picked last. Like, oh, don't pick him, he's not good, you know, like, because yeah, I mean, I've been there where, you know, we're picking teams, and you look at that person, you're like, oh, that person's not that great, you're like, oh, you know, so you're the last one to get picked. But let's just use that as an example, and you know, you're trying to, and let's say you actually, you know, you're trying to do better, but you can't. So, you know, implementing a lot of these things, some self-discipline, you know. If you really want to do better in the sport, you know, give yourself some self-discipline, and, you know, practice at your house, and have patience with practicing, because, you know, sometimes you try to get everything real quick and you don't have the patience for it. You know, be patient. You know, have courage to, you know, to be able to announce it, like, hey, man, I've been practicing. You mind if I could, you know, join this time, you know, see what I've been working on, and having the confidence to also, you know, perform, maybe not as great, but, you know, with practice you have. So, you know, there's, instead of just falling into a victim category where, like, oh, no one likes me, you know, and put your hoodie up, and, you know, like, instead of falling into that, like, victim mentality, you know, like, hey, you know, put these things that we've learned, and, you know, implement them in your daily, and ask, like I said, like I always tell you guys, ask, you know, ask your parents, you know, firstly, ask your parents. They're the first form of authority. Ask your teachers around there, you know, ask if, you know, anybody wants to help you with anything. And then, of course, you can always ask, you know, people in church, you know, ask the pastor, you know, if you have anyone around the church that you see is mature enough, you know, because that's also a big thing, is knowing people that are mature in the faith, and you can also ask them, because you guys are not alone, you know, as, you know, we're here right now at this moment taking time, I'm taking time, you guys are taking time, so there is the outcome of help, you know, you guys could seek help. And it could, for us, like for me, something like, you know, a sport thing that I just mentioned could be like, dude, that's not a big deal. But, you know, for you at that moment, at that age, it is a big deal. So instead of like me, or maybe like your parents or someone bringing you down, you know, help you, encourage you to do better, you know. And like I said, I don't have any kids, but, you know, working with a lot of sometimes parents and older people, they sometimes mention their frustrations and, you know, lack of, you know, patience, you know, lack of empathy for them, because, you know, sometimes I think, like, you know, you might, because I didn't really experience that too much, but, you know, sometimes for me, something might be important, but for your parents, it might be like, it's not really a big deal. So you kind of ask them, and they might not be too, like, encouraging about it, so you kind of even feel more, like, down and stuff. But, you know, you can always ask, like I said, other people around, you know, because at that moment, you don't know what your parents are going through. Maybe they're going through something, you know, difficult. And, you know, as, like I said, I'm not a parent, but as a parent, you know, so there's some things that, you know, you keep to yourself with your wife or husband. You know, there's bigger issues that you keep, you know, aside, and things like that you shouldn't be sharing, you know, with, like, the kids. But, you know, the kids do not understand that you might be going through something difficult. But if, you know, if that's the case, you know, we're here, we're a community. You know, we're here to help each other. You know, if you have another question of something, you can always ask us. You can always ask Pastor. You can always ask other people around the church. Or if it's something that you want to do that you know that maybe someone has done, you can always ask. There's a lot of help. There's a lot of help. I don't think there's any way that you should fall into like you should follow a victim of the victim mentality, you know, because there's a lot of help here. There is a lot of help. There's people that are willing to help. There's people that are willing to encourage you and things like that. And like I said, you know, these superpowers, it's something that you can put in your daily life. And as you get older, all these things go hand in hand. I use a lot of these things as I'm getting older because we're supposed to help each other, you know, and not just like I said in the world out there, but also, you know, spreading the message, spreading the gospel. Quick little story before I finish. On Thursday, Thursday I always bring up gym stories, huh? on Thursday I went to the gym, you know, and I hadn't seen these two guys in a very long time. It had been months. Oh, hey man, how's it going? You know, oh yeah, you know, and you know, catching up and stuff like that. And surprisingly, one of them I had like no notion or anything, but he had seen the youth event that we had in January. He had seen it through YouTube, and he like, hey, you know, I saw you this, and I was like, what? Like I would have never, you know, thought that someone from the gym that I hadn't seen in months would have seen me that. And he was like, hey man, I actually have a question for you, you know, because I remember what you were talking about, and I wanted to ask you some stuff. I was like, oh yeah, go for it. And you know, he was asking me, he's like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And, you know, helping him. And he's like, all right, man, because he's like, there's these things that I don't know, and you know, hearing what you said at that day, it kind of got me thinking. But I hadn't seen you forever, so I was kind of like, oh, how do I get a hold of him? And then seeing you here, so at the end of the day, instead of me, you know, working out, we're just right there talking, you know. And I was surprised because I was like, I didn't even would have thought that anybody, you know, outside that I hadn't seen in forever would, you know, listen to anything I was saying. But he was like, hey man, you look like, you know, you're doing good and stuff, man. Like, and he's like, well, the funny thing is that, well, to kind of cut it a little short, but one of the things he had asked me, which I thought was kind of a little funny, well, for me, was that he was like, hey, so he said that he was, I guess, talking to this girl that he met because she was going to church. And he was telling me, he's like, yeah, but that she's, you know, been trying the best they can for her to do everything properly, you know, talk to the parents, and if they're going to, you know, live together, get married, you know, the proper way. And he was telling me, like, oh, I don't know what to do, man, because I've never had anything like that. And, well, what do I do? Should I just continue to listen to her, or should I just find someone else that I don't have to deal with so much stuff? And I was like, hey, man, well, watch. The best way I can put it for you is that, you know, you're looking for someone, and at the end of the day, you know, especially you as a guy, you want peace, you know. If you deal with someone that is not going to church or anything and is going to, you know, drink and things like that, you're going to have to probably deal with stuff like that. And you go with her that doesn't do any of that, you don't have to deal with that. You know, she's going to be faithful, she's going to be loyal to you. You don't have to deal about her wandering around or you being, where is she at, what is she doing? Because, you know, at least someone in the faith, you have a conscience that she's going to be, you know, doing the best she can to be better in herself and in the relationship. And he's like, oh, man, I never thought of that. And I was all like, well, think about it. But it's just, you know, some of these things that I thought it was just a funny little interaction that I had that I've never really thought that I would. And it goes back to the thing of me telling you guys about having all these things, implementing them, because people see them, people notice, you know. And, you know, like I kind of tell my dad, joking around, is like, hey, you know, we're sons of the living God, man. We should be, you know, doing like great things. We should be like doing good. And they're like, yeah, of course, you know. But, you know, there's things that happen in our life that sometimes, you know, brings us up and down. But I think at the end of the day, we should have a really strong will within ourselves to do better, and, you know, not to be like a loser, you know. It sounds kind of messed up, but not to be like a loser, like, because people notice. People will say like, oh, he said he goes to church and he's a Christian. Look, he doesn't talk to anybody. He's just there. You know, show that you are, you know, son of the living God. You know, show that you have, you know, power, that you're able to, you know, be someone that has interest, someone that has these superpowers. You know, like, kind of put it like that. You know, like you have value. You know, you have value, and sometimes we might not see it. Sometimes people might not really tell you and things like that, but, you know, at the end of the day, we have value, you know, especially as growing up, because we might think as kids and teenagers and stuff like that, yeah, oh, no one likes me, you know. But put yourself in a position, not that people like you, but put yourself in the position that you give yourself value to the world. Give yourself value out there, because people see that value, and if that value, goes with this, and then this goes hand in hand with the fruits of the Spirit, then it's just, it's epic. They'll see you as like, oh wow, this is a Christian, and he has all these values, and he does all these things that encourage you. They even encourages them to get interested and maybe coming to become a Christian. It all goes hand in hand with each other. Like I always say, it's like a clock. All the little gizmos work together. They all work together to form time. Have all these things. So with that, hopefully you guys understood what I'm trying to say. I'm gonna do one more Sunday. We're gonna do one. Go for it. What are you gonna say? I just no comment. No. Okay. Yeah. Let's make sure we single that out too. But yeah, next week. Actually, no, I'm not gonna be here next week. We're gonna go with my dad to go see Brother Hannes. So the week out of the Zoom meeting in the airplane. Hold on, guys, we're about to take off, And then, so not this weekend, but next weekend we'll do it one more. We'll kind of maybe finish like the list. And, once we finish it, you guys can, write it down, have it with you guys, take a picture, scan the QR code. No, just kidding. Scan the QR code. But, have a picture, write it down. So, if you ever have any issue or, you're thinking about something, look it over and like, okay, what can I work on or what can I implement this? And, help each other, out there in the world. And also, of course, as Christians. That would be the biggest purpose, is to be better as Christians. So we can stand up and do a quick prayer. Thank you, God, for this blessed day. Thank you, God, for this morning's word to help us, guide us, help us to understand and be able to not give, as the message in the morning, not give our values, our fruits, our pearls to people that are, swine and inconsiderate, and help us guide ourselves to be better Christians growing up in this world that we live in now. Help us, God, to be people that have, strong faith, strong resemblance of you, so people can see us as a reflection of you, and for your name not to be blasphemed, Lord. Help us to be good. Help us to be faithful. Help us to be kind to people and show empathy to people. Help us to be strong, Christians that build up and to be better. And help us, Lord. And also we pray, Lord Jesus, for Brother Hannes and him and his family. We've been, praying for him since we heard the word that he's been sick, and we still pray every day that you heal him, Lord Jesus. And help us all to be better here as Christians and to be a strong youth. In your holy name we pray, amen.